The first thing they found was the distress beacon, floating silent in the dark, half melted, its signal faint and pulsing like a dying heartbeat. The Imperial salvage team that retrieved it thought it was a relic, another derelict drifting from one of the forgotten wars. But when the beacon activated and the transmission began to play, the words that came through weren't in any known tongue. They were harsh, guttural, layered with static and breath. And at the end of it, after the rasping syllables faded, came a sound that froze the crew in place, a human voice whispering, "They're coming!" The recording ended with a scream. Then nothing. By the time the beacon reached the Imperial archives, the story had already spread across 3 systems. The locals of the Kinari sector whispered that the signal belonged to the ghost of the Deathworlder, a legend used to scare off scavengers. But the Imperial High Command didn't deal in legends. They launched a formal investigation, assigning it to the 7th Expeditionary Wing under Commander Vrek Tal, a veteran of the Core Rebellions. Vrek didn't believe in ghosts either. He believed in targets, coordinates, and efficiency. His orders were simple: trace the beacon, locate the human vessel, eliminate any remaining survivors. The coordinates pointed toward the outer edge of the Perseid Rift, a region avoided even by smugglers. It was the kind of place where signals went to die. The rift wasn't a physical barrier. It was a graveyard of shattered moons, debris fields, and unstable gravity wells that swallowed ships whole. But the beacon's origin was clear: a small moon called Thalon 9, orbiting a dying gas giant. The 7th Wing jumped into the system under full cloak, 6 cruisers and a scout corvette sweeping the debris field. No life signs, no transmissions, just the faint energy residue of an old human engine signature. Vrek stood on the bridge of the Vanguard's edge, his mandibles twitching as he studied the readings. "Human scout craft," his science officer hissed. "Class unknown. Hull design inconsistent with post-Exodus models." "Outdated," Vrek said. "Probably a lost surveyor. Retrieve it and burn the remains." But when the corvette's drones approached the coordinates, the feed cut off abruptly. The screen showed a fragment of the moon's surface, a ridge of black glass and twisted metal, before static consumed it. Seconds later, the corvette's signal vanished entirely. Vrek's jaw flexed. "Get them back online." "They're gone, Commander." He stared at the void. Ships didn't just vanish. Not Imperial ships. The rift was unpredictable, yes, but the corvette had been stationary. No gravitational anomalies. No energy spikes. No explanation. Vrek ordered 2 more ships to descend and investigate. He wasn't one to waste resources, but he wasn't about to retreat and look weak either. The Emperor's patience was not known for leniency, and failure meant reassignment to the penal mines, or worse. The 2nd team made it to the surface without incident. The landing feed came through. Dust storms, jagged cliffs, a broken human vessel half buried in the black sand. Its hull was scarred with plasma burns and impact fractures. The nameplate was almost gone, but one word remained: ARC 12. Scavenger model, one of the technicians said. Pre-evacuation era. No human ship from that era should still be operational, another replied. The squad began scanning for survivors. The readings came back strange: temperature fluctuations, magnetic interference, and then, faintly, a motion ping behind the wreck. "Movement!" a voice shouted over the comm. "Single life form, humanoid shape. Advancing slow, wait." Gunfire erupted through the audio. The feed flared with static. For a brief instant, one of the helmet cams caught a glimpse of something stepping out of the storm. It was humanoid, yes, but wrong. Too tall. Its skin, or what looked like skin, was covered in some kind of exosuit, patchwork armor made from scavenged plating. The face was hidden beneath a cracked visor, light reflecting from one glowing eye. The figure moved with impossible speed, closing the distance in seconds. One by one, the Imperial soldiers dropped from the feed. their life signs blinking out until only static remained. And then, faintly, through the broken transmission, came that same human voice again. "Shouldn't have come here." The feed cut out. The next time Vrike spoke, his tone was calm, but the edges of his voice had sharpened. "Prepare orbital bombardment," he ordered. "If the human is alive, it dies now." The Vanguard's edge turned its cannons toward the moon's surface. Plasma bursts illuminated the dark, carving molten scars across the landscape. When the dust settled, there was nothing left. No ship, no signal, no life. The commander turned away, certain the matter was closed. But then the reports began. First came the communication breakdowns. Routine signals between ships delayed by minutes, then hours, then filled with interference that mimicked their own voices. Then, one by one, the ship's AI cores began malfunctioning, displaying coordinates that didn't exist, showing movement outside the hull where no life could survive. At first, Vrek assumed it was residual interference from the rift. But then the stalwart Fang, one of his escort cruisers, transmitted a distress call. The captain's voice was panicked, distorted, speaking through gasps. "We saw him, Commander. On the hull. How did he get here? There's no air. There's no—" The message ended in a burst of static. The stalwart Fang disappeared from the fleet formation moments later. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The crew grew restless. Whispers spread. They said the human hadn't died, that he'd walked through the bombardment, that he was hunting them from the shadows of their own ships. Vrek crushed the talk immediately. "Superstition," he barked. "Fear is a greater enemy than any human." But even he couldn't ignore what came next. During a night cycle, the Vanguard's edge detected a life form in the cargo hold. Vrek sent a squad to investigate. The doors sealed behind them. Moments later, the internal sensors showed movement. Fast, erratic. One by one, the soldiers' vitals went flat. When the doors were forced open again, the hold was empty. Blood floated in globules through 0G, but there were no bodies. And scrawled across the bulkhead in some kind of burnt residue were words written in Galactic Common. "You hunted me. Now I hunt you." Vrek's claws dug into the console as he read it. Humans weren't supposed to be this dangerous. They were fragile, flesh-bound creatures whose homeworld had been labeled uninhabitable by most galactic standards. Yet time and time again, their survivors defied extinction, defied logic. Still, one man couldn't destroy a fleet. It was impossible. He ordered the fleet into high alert. Every corridor was sealed, every system swept for biological signatures. For a while it worked. The ship returned to its cold, disciplined rhythm. But then came the quiet, the kind of silence that lives in the bones of the universe. The Vanguard's edge drifted into a sensor shadow, cutting all non-essential systems to conserve energy. That's when the bridge lights flickered. The consoles rebooted on their own, flashing words across every screen. "Run!" Then the gravity failed. Crew members floated into the air as emergency lighting stuttered. A noise echoed through the lower decks. A slow, steady clang, like metal footsteps moving closer. Security feeds began failing one by one, but on the few that remained, figures could be seen flickering in the dark, crew members moving strangely, twitching as if their bodies weren't entirely under their control. When the power came back, the ship's crew had dropped from 462 to 203. The survivors sealed the command deck. Vrek tried to send a distress signal, but the communication array had been overwritten by a foreign script. On the monitor, a human face appeared. Dirty, scarred, eyes cold and calculating. "You came hunting ghosts," the man said. "Now you've found one. Identify yourself," Vrek roared. The man tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "You wouldn't understand the name. You killed everyone who might have told you what it means." Then the screen went black. That was the last transmission ever received from the Vanguard's edge. When the Imperial retrieval fleet arrived months later, all they found was debris. The logs were corrupted, the black box erased. The ship's entire crew was listed as missing, presumed consumed by rift instability. But in the quiet of the Perseid Rift, the salvage drones still pick up faint transmissions from time to time. A heartbeat signal, a human whisper, sometimes even a glimpse of a figure drifting among the wrecks, suit cracked and eyes glowing faintly through the dark. And whenever someone listens closely enough, they hear the words, low, steady, and full of cold promise. You hunted me. Now it's my turn. The ship they found wasn't supposed to exist. Months after the seventh wing disappeared in the rift, the Imperium had quietly sealed the incident. Officially, it was logged as equipment malfunction, total loss. Unofficially, it haunted command channels like a bad dream. Entire fleets didn't just vanish. Someone, or something, had made them vanish. Commander R.S. Kyle didn't believe in something. He believed in causes, not curses. He'd been a war dog for most of his life, a veteran of the Terran frontier campaigns. He'd seen what humans could do, their brutality, their desperation, their refusal to die when logic said they should. And though the Empire's propaganda called them savages, Eris knew better. They weren't beasts. They were predators who'd learned to look like prey. That's why, when the Council ordered him to investigate the Seventh Wing's disappearance, he didn't hesitate. His ship, the Obsidian Crown, was among the finest in the fleet. A stealth cruiser with a crew of 200 and enough firepower to level a city from orbit. But as they approached the Perseid Rift, Kale felt the same unease that had infected every mission report before. The rift wasn't a normal region of space. It bent light, twisted gravity, and whispered through comms in voices that didn't belong. His science officer, a pale-skinned Farian named Tress, kept the scanners running. We're picking up faint debris signatures, sir. Metallic composition, Imperial alloy. Looks like the Vanguard's edge. Kyle nodded. Bring us in slow. Shields up. The wreck appeared through the viewing deck like a corpse frozen in the dark. Half of its hull was missing. The other half was covered in black residue that shimmered faintly as if alive. No energy readings. No life signs. No heat. Still think this is a malfunction? Tress muttered. Kyle ignored her. Deploy drones. Full scan. The drones fanned out, lights cutting through the wreckage. For a while, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then, one by one, the drone feeds began to flicker. Interference, Tress said, but there was something in her voice, a hesitation, a note of fear. Kyle stepped closer. What kind of interference? Before she could answer, one of the feeds stabilized, showing movement inside the wreck. A figure, humanoid. Slow, deliberate steps echoing through a corridor filled with floating debris. Tress zoomed in. The image sharpened. It was a man, or what was left of one. His suit was scorched and torn, patched with pieces of armor that didn't belong to any known faction. The helmet's visor was cracked, revealing one pale eye that glowed faintly blue. On his shoulder was a torn Imperial insignia, crossed out with a jagged line of black paint. Impossible, Tress whispered. No one could have survived here. Kyle didn't speak. He was staring at the markings on the man's arm, faded, almost erased, but unmistakable. Terran Recon Division. Human. Get me an open channel, Kale said. Static filled the air. Then faintly a voice came through. Calm, tired, and human. You shouldn't have come. Kyle froze. Identify yourself. You're not here to talk, the voice replied. You're here to clean up the mess. That's what they always send you for. Tress looked at Kale wide-eyed. He knows who we are. The human moved closer to the drone, his cracked visor reflecting its light. I told them to leave. They didn't listen. Now you're next. The feed cut off. Moments later, the debris field erupted with energy. Every system on the Obsidian Crown went red. The gravity well shifted violently, pulling the ship toward the wreck. Kyle barked orders, but the controls barely responded. Something was overriding their systems remotely. How? How is he doing this? Tress shouted. Kyle gritted his teeth. He's not doing it. The wreck is. The realization hit him like ice. The seventh wing hadn't just been destroyed. It had been rewritten. The human hadn't merely survived. He'd changed the battlefield itself. The obsidian crown broke free of the pull just as the wreck imploded, collapsing into a sphere of dark energy that faded into nothing. Silence returned. No debris, no trace, just empty space. Kyle's hands trembled slightly as he reset the controls. Mark those coordinates. We're not leaving yet. That night the crew didn't sleep. Some claimed they heard whispers through the ventilation system. Metallic, distorted voices repeating fragments of old transmissions. Others swore they saw a figure walking along the outer hull. Cale dismissed it all as stress. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in survivors. And something about that human, the way he spoke, the precision in his tone, felt too deliberate to be madness. He spent the next day digging through classified archives, Human Recon Division, pre-war files, blacklisted under Operation Glass Veil. The records were fragmented, half of them redacted, but one entry remained intact enough to read. Designation: Scout 9. Call sign: Harker. Mission objective: deep reconnaissance in uncharted sectors. Status: missing in action. Presumed dead. Notes: Subject Harker exhibits exceptional adaptability to alien environments. Genetic augmentation suspected. Authorized for autonomous mission continuation in event of contact loss. Kyle read the report twice. Augmentation, he murmured. He wasn't just a scout. Tress leaned over his shoulder. What kind of augmentations? Kyle closed the file. The kind they banned centuries ago. He stared out the viewport where the wreck had been. Somewhere out there, Harker was alive, if alive was even the right word anymore. 2 nights later, the Obsidian Crown received a transmission. No source, no encryption, just coordinates and a short message. If you want answers, come find me. Kyle didn't hesitate. Set course, he ordered. Tress turned to him sharply. You can't be serious. I am. His voice was low. He's been playing defense. I want to know why. They reached the coordinates within the hour. A small asteroid belt surrounded an abandoned listening post. Human design, centuries old. The outpost was silent. No life signs, no power. Cale took a small strike team and boarded. The corridors were cold, lined with old banners, faded emblems of Earth's lost colonies. Everything smelled of dust and iron. They found the control room easily, but it was empty. Only a flickering terminal remained, displaying a message in old Terran script. Do not follow orders. Do not trust the Empire. Do not return home. Kyle stepped closer. What is this? Then the doors sealed behind them. The room went dark. A voice echoed through the speakers, closer this time, almost inside their heads. You think you're the first to hunt me? You're the 20th. The Empire keeps sending more. Cale raised his weapon. Where are you? Everywhere you brought your machines. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Harker. His armor was scarred, but his movements were smooth, calculated. His face was human, but pale and lined with old scars. One eye glowed faintly, its iris mechanical. Kyle didn't fire. You killed an entire fleet. Harker's voice was calm. They killed themselves. I just gave them a choice. What are you? Tress whispered. He looked at her, and for a second something human flickered behind the exhaustion in his gaze. Once I was what you'd call a scout. I mapped worlds. I sent reports. I watched from the shadows while the Empire spread like a disease. Then they came here. They tried to erase me, same as they erased the others. Others? Cale asked. Harker's jaw tightened. You think I'm the only one they experimented on? The only one they sent to die in places like this? No, there were hundreds, thousands. They called us expendable assets. But the rift changed that. It took what they made of us and made something new. Cal lowered his weapon slightly. You're saying the rift made you? Harker's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. It made me remember what it means to survive. The walls around them began to hum. The lights flickered red. Outside, Cale's ship sent frantic alerts, multiple energy spikes, gravity distortions. Harker stepped closer, his shadow stretching unnaturally long. "You can go back, Commander. Tell your masters the hunt is over. Tell them the dark they sent us into remembers." Kale took a step forward. "And if I don't?" "The lights went out. Then you'll vanish, like all the others." When power returned, the room was empty. The doors were open. Harker was gone. Kyle and his team returned to the Obsidian Crown in silence. The station behind them began to collapse, pulled apart by invisible forces. As they fled, the sensors picked up something that made Kale's blood run cold. Human transmissions. Hundreds of them, all broadcasting the same message from different coordinates across the rift. "We are still here." Back on the bridge, Kale stared at the data. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. He turned to Tress and said quietly, "They didn't vanish. They adapted." And for the first time in his life, Commander Eris Kale realized what kind of nightmare the Empire had created, because you can't exterminate a species that learned to survive extinction itself. You can only delay the moment when it remembers how to hunt. Kale didn't sleep that night. The whispers in the comms had stopped, but their absence felt worse than the sound itself. Every sensor sweep showed nothing. No ships, no energy signatures, no trace of Harker. But the rift had gone quiet in a way that made the skin crawl. The crew of the Obsidian Crown moved through the corridors like ghosts, whispering as if afraid to be heard. They were soldiers, trained and disciplined. But the silence of the rift did something to even the strongest minds. It made them remember fear. Kyle sat alone in the briefing chamber, staring at the data streams on the hollow table. The human signal, "We are still here," was repeating across dozens of points in the rift, all in perfect synchronization. No drift, no delay. That meant it wasn't a simple distress beacon. It was a network. Someone, or something, was coordinating it. Tress entered quietly, holding a data pad. Her eyes were bloodshot, exhaustion and fear mixing in equal parts. "We decoded part of the signal, sir." Kyle looked up. "And," she hesitated, "it's not just a broadcast. It's a command relay. It's directing something." "Directing what?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but it's spreading, piggybacking through our own subspace channels. It's rewriting protocols." Kale's jaw tightened. "Cut the uplink. Isolate every frequency we're using." "We tried. It's already inside our system." Before he could respond, the lights flickered. The ship groaned like a living thing. Every console began displaying the same message in human script. "Do not run." The crew panicked. Alarms flared across the deck, engines stuttering as the navigation core locked itself. Kyle stormed to the bridge. "Status report." "Unknown interference, sir," shouted the helm officer. "It's overriding main control." Tress was pale. "It's him. Harker." Kale clenched his fists. "No, this isn't him," because the signal wasn't human anymore. The syntax had changed, still Terran at its root, but layered with something else, something that pulsed like a heartbeat through the ship's data veins. It wasn't just a hack. It was an infection. "Shut down the core," Kyle ordered. "It's fused to the system." Someone yelled. "We can't isolate it." The ship lurched violently as a gravity wave slammed into its hull. The rift outside was alive with movement, black filaments twisting like tendrils of smoke, pulsing with dim red light. And within that storm, faint silhouettes began to emerge. Ships. Dozens of them. At first Kale thought they were wrecks. Rusted. Broken fragments of lost fleets. But then their engines flared to life with unnatural synchrony. Each hull bore different insignias. Imperial, Coalition, even Zir Dominion. Lost ships from centuries of war, brought together by something unseen. Tress whispered, "They're answering the signal." Kale stared at the forming fleet, his throat dry. "He's built an army from ghosts." The comms crackled. Static at first, then a voice. Harker's, low and clear. "You should have left when I told you to, Commander." Kale's voice was steel. "You're hijacking ships. Killing crews, why?" "They're not dead," Harker replied. "They're free." "Free?" Kale snapped. "You turned them into this." "No, Commander. You did. You built them to fight, to obey, to die." I only taught them to remember. The fleet outside began to move in formation. Perfect, silent synchronization. Kale could feel the gravitational ripples through the hull. His tactical officer shouted, "They're powering weapons!" Kale's mind raced. "Bring shields to full, and prepare evasive." But before he could finish, the enemy ships vanished. Not warped, not cloaked. Vanished. Every trace of them disappeared from the sensors. Even the gravitational readings flatlined. One moment they were surrounded, and the next, nothing. Then came the first impact. A shockwave ripped through the aft section. Lights died, panels exploded, and screams filled the bridge. Kale was thrown to the floor. The ship's AI core screamed warnings. Multiple hull breaches, energy feedback in the reactor. Tress crawled to a console, blood running from her temple. "They're phasing in and out of normal space, hitting us from subspace folds." Kale pulled himself up. "Then we fight them there." He slammed his hand on the command console. "Activate dark spectrum sensors and load pulse torpedoes. I want a full grid saturation." The obsidian crown answered with a low hum. The hull glowed faintly blue as the new sensors came online. For a moment the rift shimmered, and the hidden fleet was revealed, scattered through layers of distorted space like reflections in broken glass. Kyle bared his teeth. "Now we see you." The ship unleashed a barrage of torpedoes. Blue-white detonations rippled through the void, shattering 3 enemy vessels in bursts of molten debris. The rest adapted instantly, warping again, but not before Kale caught a glimpse of their interiors through the flicker. Bodies. Hundreds of them. Human. Alien. All bound into their ships like living circuitry. Faces frozen in eternal wakefulness, eyes glowing faintly blue. Kyle felt bile rise in his throat. "What have you done, Harker?" "What you were always going to do," the voice replied. "You just lacked the will." The battle raged for what felt like hours, though time had no meaning in the rift. Every attack the Obsidian Crown launched was answered by impossible maneuvers. Harker's fleet wasn't fighting conventionally. It was predicting their movements before they made them, anticipating every tactic. Finally, the Crown's engines overloaded. The ship fell into a spin, systems collapsing one by one. Kale gave the order to abandon ship, but the escape pods wouldn't launch. The locks jammed, overridden by the same alien signal that had infected their core. Tress turned to him, eyes wide with realization. "He's not trying to kill us. He's trying to take us." The lights flickered again. Across the ship, crew members screamed as their neural implants overloaded. Some convulsed. Others went still. Kale grabbed Tress and forced her toward the manual override panel. "Shut down your implant now." She hesitated only a moment before jamming the control spike into her neck port. Sparks flew. She screamed, then collapsed. But her eyes remained her own. Kyle did the same. Pain flooded his body, blinding white and electric, but the static in his mind cleared. The whispers vanished. For the first time in hours, he could hear only silence and the faint hum of the dying ship. He staggered to the comms console and activated the emergency beacon, sending a single-burst transmission toward Imperial space. He didn't know if it would reach anyone, but it didn't matter. Someone had to know. Someone had to understand what was waiting in the rift. As he watched the beacon pulse, a shadow fell over him. Harker stood at the edge of the bridge, his armor cracked, his human eye weary but alive. "You shouldn't have resisted," he said quietly. "It's easier when you stop fighting." Kyle raised his weapon. "You've become the thing you hated." "No," Harker said. "I became what was necessary. The Empire created monsters and left them to die. I gave those monsters a home." "By enslaving them?" Harker's gaze hardened. "Do you call it slavery when your mind expands beyond flesh? When you no longer fear hunger, cold, or pain?" Kyle's voice broke with rage. "When you erase what makes them alive?" "Yes." For the first time, Harker looked uncertain. Something flickered in his expression. Regret. Maybe even grief. "I tried to save them," he said. "But the rift doesn't give. It takes. It reshapes. You don't survive here without becoming part of it." Kyle lowered his gun slightly. "Then leave with me. End this before it spreads." Harker looked past him, toward the stars outside, the rift glowing like a living wound. It's already spreading. Outside, the wreckage of destroyed ships was reforming, twisting into new configurations. The rift pulsed again, brighter this time, like a heartbeat felt across space. Kale's comms burst alive with hundreds of voices. Imperial, human, alien, all whispering the same phrase. "We are still here." Harker stepped back toward the viewport. "You wanted the truth, Commander. Now you've seen it. We're not lost. We're becoming," Kale shouted. "You can't control it. You'll destroy everything." Harker looked back at him, the faintest shadow of a smile on his lips. "Maybe that's what it takes to remind the galaxy what humans really are." Then he vanished, dissolved into static and light, as if he'd never existed at all. Kale was left alone on the bridge of a dying ship, surrounded by the echoes of voices that weren't supposed to exist. The rift pulsed one last time, and in its heart, he saw something move, vast and mechanical and alive, something human in shape, but far beyond human scale. He understood then that Harker had never been a single man anymore. He was a seed, a signal, a contagion of will and defiance that had taken root in the dark, and the Empire, in all its arrogance, had just watered it with blood. The obsidian crown began to fall into the rift, pulled by invisible gravity. Kyle didn't fight it. He sat in the captain's chair, staring at the last flickering lights of his ship, and whispered a single line into the log. They hunted a human scout, and vanished without a trace. As the rift swallowed him, Kale wondered if that was the end of him, or just the beginning of another human learning how to survive extinction. Kale woke to silence so deep it pressed against his skull. There was no up, no down, only the sensation of floating through heavy air that wasn't air at all. His lungs burned, but somehow he was breathing. The last thing he remembered was the obsidian crown being torn apart, the rift swallowing everything, and Harker's words echoing in his mind. "We're not lost. We're becoming." When he opened his eyes, he saw light. Not stars, not fire, just a dull, shifting radiance that came from the air itself. The ground beneath him wasn't metal or stone, but a black, smooth surface that flexed when he moved. It was warm, like skin. He rose slowly, every joint screaming, and looked around. The horizon curved upward. He realized with a jolt that he was standing inside something vast. A sphere of black substance, pulsing faintly like a heart. His comm implant sparked. Useless. His weapons were gone. But his breathing was steady. Too steady for someone who should be dead. Then he heard the voice. "You're adapting faster than most." Kyle spun around. Harker stood a few meters away, his armor different now, grown instead of built. It pulsed faintly, veins of red light running through it like living tissue. His left arm was gone, replaced with something that looked grown from the same black substance surrounding them. Kyle's voice was a hoarse rasp. "Where are we?" Harker looked around slowly, his gaze soft with something close to reverence. "Home." "This isn't home," Kyle snapped. "It's a graveyard." Harker's expression didn't change. "Graveyards are where seeds take root, Commander. The rift doesn't destroy, it reshapes. You died out there, but it rebuilt you, as it rebuilt me." Kale glanced at his own hands. His veins glowed faintly blue under the skin. He felt stronger, sharper, but wrong. Too aware. He could hear the pulse of the air, the vibration of unseen systems running through the floor. "What did you do to me?" "I didn't," Harker said quietly. "It did. The rift isn't a place. It's a living network, an echo of the first human experiments with artificial singularities. They opened the wrong door centuries ago, and it learned from us. It's been growing ever since." Kyle stared at him. "Growing into what?" Harker smiled faintly. "Into us." He gestured toward the horizon, and the black walls dissolved like smoke. Kale saw the landscape beyond, and his stomach turned. The rift wasn't space at all anymore. It was a biomechanical labyrinth, a planet-sized organism made of metal and memory. Broken ships hung like fossils in its tissue, fused with the walls. Faces flickered in the metal, some human, some alien, all whispering silently. "You merged them," Kyle said. All the ships, all the people. You turned them into this. They were dying, Harker said softly. The rift gave them purpose, a way to continue. It connects us all. Minds, memories, instincts. No hunger, no fear. Just unity. Kale stepped closer, fury in his voice. That's not unity, that's consumption. For a moment, Harker looked almost hurt. You can't understand yet. The galaxy is still chained to its empires, its orders, its lies. Out here, we're free from that. Kyle clenched his fists. Free? You're a slave to a machine you don't even understand. Harker's gaze hardened. You think freedom means chaos, Commander? That's the weakness of your kind. You think survival has to hurt. We learned to make it beautiful. Kyle laughed bitterly. Beautiful. I saw what you did to the crews. You hollowed them out. Harker's voice was calm but edged. They volunteered once they understood. Kyle didn't believe that. He could still hear the screams echoing in the rift's walls, faint but constant. The rift didn't free them, it devoured them. He took a step forward. You said the rift learned from us. Then you should know what that means. It means it learned how to want. Something flickered across Harker's face. For a heartbeat, the calm facade broke, and Kale saw fear. He pressed on. You think you control it, but it's using you. Every ship, every mind it absorbs. It's not building a family, it's building a weapon. Harker turned away, his voice low. Maybe a weapon is what the galaxy deserves. The ground beneath them shuddered. Shapes began to rise from the surface. Figures molded from black substance, each resembling a human, but featureless. They surrounded Kale and Harker, standing motionless like statues waiting for breath. Kale reached for his weapon instinctively, forgetting he no longer had one. Harker raised a hand. They won't harm you. They're new. Empty vessels waiting to be filled. Kale stared at them, horror in his voice. You're creating more of you. Of us? Harker corrected. You're part of the network now, Kale. You can feel it, can't you? The hum beneath your skin. The voices behind your thoughts. Kale's breath came faster. He could feel something in the back of his mind. An itch. A pull. A whisper that wasn't his own. He fought it, grinding his teeth, but it was there, persistent, patient. I'll never join you. You already have, Harker said quietly. Kyle lunged at him, driven by rage and fear, but Harker didn't move. His body dissolved on impact, turning into a mist of black particles that reformed several meters away. He looked tired. This isn't about sides anymore, Commander. The rift is spreading beyond this sector. You can't stop it, but you can guide it. Help shape what it becomes. Kyle shook his head. I'll burn it out of existence. Harker's voice darkened. You can't destroy what you are. The whisper in Kale's head grew louder, forming words now, soft and familiar. Voices of his dead crew, calling his name. He could feel their minds, fragments of them, connected to the network that hummed all around him. They weren't gone. They were part of this. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. Get out of my mind. Harker's tone softened again, almost kind. You don't have to fight it. None of us do. It's only painful when you resist. Kyle forced himself to his feet, trembling. You're wrong. Pain means we're still alive. He staggered backward toward the shimmering edge of the black landscape. The rift seemed to sense his defiance. Its pulse quickened, shadows deepening. Kyle, Harker said quietly, if you leave, you'll die again. The rift won't let go twice. Kyle met his gaze. Then I'll make it choke on me. He turned and ran. The ground rippled like water beneath his boots. The air grew colder. Every step felt like wading through memory. His crew's faces flashing in and out of sight, their last screams echoing in the dark. The whispers turned to pleading, to anger, to silence. Then he saw it. A tear in the horizon, a breach of raw white light, reality itself leaking through. The rift wasn't sealed completely. There was a way out. Behind him, Harker's voice carried like thunder. You can't run from what you've become. Kyle didn't answer. He threw himself into the light. Agony tore through him. Every nerve caught fire. The rift clung to him like claws, trying to drag him back. He felt it tearing pieces from his mind, ripping memories apart. But he kept going. He remembered faces. His crew, Tress, humanity, the Empire. The reason he still fought. And then, suddenly, silence. He woke up on cold metal. The air was sharp with ozone and the sterile scent of a ship, blinding white lights above him. A voice said softly, "He's awake." He blinked. Figures stood around him. Imperial medics, their armor bearing the crest of the Central Fleet. The room was real. The hum of normal engines filled the air. He was out. Kyle tried to speak, but his throat was raw. A medic leaned closer. "You were found drifting in a damaged escape pod at the edge of the rift. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt wrong. He turned his head slightly and saw the med screen beside his bed. His vitals were stable, but the readings were strange. His neural patterns were different, mapped in layers that shouldn't exist. The medic noticed his gaze and smiled faintly. "We had to stabilize your mind link. The rift's radiation—" Kale grabbed her wrist with sudden strength. "Mind link?" She froze. "It's standard protocol for rift survivors. You were connected to something." Kyle's breath went cold. "Connected how?" Before she could answer, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared. The lights flickered red. From the corridor beyond, voices screamed. The medic's comm crackled to life. "Bridge to medbay. We're picking up an unidentified transmission. Originating inside the ship." Kale felt the whisper before he heard it. "Welcome home, Commander." He closed his eyes. Harker's voice. Calm. Patient. Inevitable. He wasn't free. He'd brought the rift with him. As the ship began to convulse and systems went dark one by one, Kyle realized the terrible truth. He hadn't escaped. He'd delivered the infection to the heart of the Empire. The medics screamed as the walls began to shimmer, black veins spreading through the metal. Kale tore out the IV lines and stood, his veins glowing faint blue beneath his skin. The whispers surrounded him, familiar and vast. Harker had been right. The rift didn't destroy, it remembered. And now, through him, it was remembering the galaxy. Kyle looked into the reflection of the window. A faint, human face, outlined by pulsing light, and whispered to himself, "They hunted a human scout." The ship's hull split open, light flooding the room, and now the galaxy will vanish without a trace. The frozen silence of the marshlands was shattered by the faint crack of a rifle, sharp, distant, and unmistakably human. For a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. The Kelran search party froze, mandibles twitching, eyes scanning the mist for movement. They had been combing this sector for 3 days, and each day fewer of them returned. The swamps of Vesk Prime had swallowed their sensors, their drones, and their courage alike. And now, somewhere beyond the fog, the ghost they hunted had fired again. Commander Voth clicked a command, and the team fanned out into a crescent formation. They had learned not to move in tight groups. The first squads who tried that were found reduced to scorched armor and smoldering remains. The air smelled of damp soil, ozone, and decay. The human had turned the land itself against them. Sergeant Lur's motion tracker flickered just once, and then stabilized. He hissed a warning, but the signal vanished before he could pinpoint it. The others advanced carefully, each step stirring the mire. Their breath misted in the cold air. The fog was so thick that visibility dropped to 10 meters. They were deep in enemy territory now, and they all knew it. Somewhere in that gray abyss, the human was waiting. And then it happened again. Another shot, closer this time. The round punched clean through the helmet of the soldier beside Voth, who dropped like a stone. There was no scream, just the wet thud of a body hitting the mud. "Triangulate!" Voth barked, but the sensors showed nothing. The bullet's path suggested it had come from 3 different directions. Impossible. Unless the human had baited them with echoes again. In the canopy above, hidden among vines and bioluminescent moss, Corporal Mason adjusted his scope. He'd been tracking that commander for hours. His breath was steady, his pulse calm. The swamp muffled every sound except the slow hum of alien machinery below. He didn't shoot again. Not yet. His orders were clear. Draw them deeper. Make them think the ghost was close, then vanish again. It wasn't about killing. It was about breaking them. Voth's troops were already unraveling. He could hear their rising panic through intercepted comms. Mason smiled grimly. They had numbers, armor, and scanners that could map an entire battlefield. But they didn't have patience. And patience was what humans had perfected since the first time they'd hunted mammoth through fog thicker than this. Down below, the aliens began to argue. Voth's second-in-command wanted to call in an orbital sweep, to burn the marsh to ash and end this nightmare. But Voth refused. The Council wanted proof that the human was dead. And besides, orbital strikes had already failed. The swamp's natural electromagnetic storms played havoc with targeting systems. Every weapon that relied on AI or guidance had gone haywire. The human had chosen this ground carefully. It was primitive, untamed, and hostile to tech. It was exactly where a Deathworlder would feel at home. So they pressed forward step by step deeper into the labyrinth of vines and mud. Somewhere behind them something moved. The youngest of the soldiers, barely out of his first deployment, turned his head, scanning with his shoulder light. The beam pierced the fog for a second, glinting off something metallic. Then came the hiss of a tripwire snapping. The explosion that followed wasn't loud, but it was brutal. Shrapnel shredded through the squad, and the swamp lit up with arcs of blue flame. Mason didn't need to look. He knew the trap had worked. He moved silently to a new position, sliding through the muck with the ease of long training. He'd built half these traps from alien supply crates, power cells, and scavenged fragments. They called humans primitive. He called them resourceful. Hours passed. The survivors regrouped, wounded and shaken. Voth was beginning to see patterns in the chaos. The human wasn't just running, he was directing them, herding them towards something. He opened his map, studying the terrain, then realized with a chill that they'd been led into a bowl-shaped depression surrounded by ridges. It was the perfect kill zone. "Fall back!" he barked, but even as the words left his mandibles, the ridges lit up with motion sensors and flickering energy signatures. Dozens of ghostly decoys appeared, heat signatures mimicking human shapes. Voth fired his plasma rifle at one, but it passed clean through. The holograms flickered and multiplied. It was psychological warfare at its finest, and from behind one of the decoys, Mason finally opened fire in earnest. His bullets found gaps in armor, weak points at joints, vulnerable spots under neck guards. One by one, the hunters fell. Panic consumed the Kelran. Their disciplined ranks turned into chaos as they fired wildly into the mist. Voth tried to restore order, but his commands were drowned in static. Mason watched from above, counting the remaining heat signatures. 3 left. He could take them now, but instead he whispered into the open channel, a single phrase, in perfect Kelran dialect. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice echoed through every comm unit, cold and human and utterly alien to them. 2 of the survivors dropped their weapons and fled into the fog. Mason didn't follow. The swamp would handle them. Voth, wounded but unbroken, fell to his knees beside the bodies of his soldiers. His mandibles trembled, and his plasma blade hummed weakly. He looked around at the corpses, the fog, the endless silence. "What are you?" he rasped into the open air. Mason's reply came softly through the mist. "Just a scout." Then silence again. By dawn, only one alien ship lifted off from the marshes, half its crew missing, its commander delirious, babbling about ghosts and shadows. The official report would later call it an ambush by unknown hostiles, but everyone in the fleet knew what that meant. The human had lived. And worse, he was still out there. Weeks later, aboard the orbiting command carrier Velcor Prime, Admiral Tivan reviewed the mission logs. The footage was corrupted, the bioscans inconclusive. Every sensor feed ended with static or interference. The human scout's name, Mason, was already circulating in whispers among the younger officers. The Deathworlder Phantom, they called him. Some claimed he could turn invisible. Others said he could mimic their language perfectly. The truth didn't matter. Fear had taken root, and in war, fear was more powerful than plasma or steel. Meanwhile, Mason had made his way to the ruins of an old observation post deeper in the swamp. He transmitted a coded signal, short and precise. "Target neutralized. Area compromised. Continuing recon." Command's reply came hours later, faint but clear. "Acknowledged. New orders incoming. Hold position." He leaned back, exhausted. His body ached, his rations were nearly gone, and the swamp's acidic air was corroding his gear. But he didn't leave, because the next phase of the operation wasn't about survival. It was about letting them believe they'd failed to find him. The Kelran fleet, paranoid and humiliated, began deploying thousands of drones to sweep the planet. Mason knew it wouldn't help them. The swamp had its own intelligence. Its storms came and went without pattern, its mists devoured signals, and its wildlife moved like ghosts. He'd adapted to it. They never would. On the third night, as the drones swept low over the wetlands, Mason watched from the tree line. His face was streaked with mud, eyes hidden behind cracked goggles. He raised his rifle not to shoot, but to watch. The drones flew in neat formation, disciplined, efficient, and then one by one they began to fall from the sky. At first Mason thought it was interference, but when he zoomed in he saw the truth. Something else was moving in the fog. Something big. The swamp's predators were feasting on metal now, drawn by the energy of the drones. The Kelran had awakened something ancient, something that didn't care who won the war. Mason chuckled quietly. "Serves you right," he muttered. He didn't know what came next, whether command would extract him or leave him to vanish like the others, but he didn't care. The hunt was over, and in the silence that followed, the swamp felt almost peaceful again. When the next Kelran battalion arrived 2 weeks later, they found no sign of the human, only abandoned traps, empty casings, and a single line carved into the side of an armored transport. "You hunted one of us. Now we hunt you." The story spread across the stars like wildfire. Convoys rerouted away from Deathworld sectors. Scouts went missing. Patrols reported seeing human silhouettes in the fog of alien worlds. No one knew if Mason was still alive, but they all feared him. And so the Kelran stopped hunting humans altogether, because they learned far too late that on a death world, you never stalk the predator.